We want to gain as many delegates to the convention as we can, from California to right here in Texas.
So what you just saw there was Elizabeth Warren last night as the South Carolina results were rolling in. And it was a really bad night for Warren. So bad that she didn't even win one single delegate from all of South Carolina. And yet in that speech, she was talking about winning every delegate she can and taking them to the convention, making her goal extremely clear at this point. Her objective is to go to the convention and try to steal the nomination from Bernie Sanders. There's no other explanation for what Elizabeth Warren is doing right now. Elizabeth Warren damn well knows, given her level of general support, given the fact that she's losing her own state to Bernie Sanders, given that she has very low support among Latinos and among Black Americans, that she has no path to either a majority or even a plurality of delegates. So her only hope is to slow Bernie Sanders down because he's the most likely one to win a majority and try to go to convention and steal it from him. And this isn't a conspiracy theory. In no way am I making this up. Last night on CNN, I posted about this in my previous video, but I'll reiterate it. There were reports from the Warren campaign that South Carolina was never about Warren even doing well or winning delegates. It was all about siphoning Bernie's vote, because every vote they took away from Bernie took away a couple delegates from Bernie. So Bernie Sanders was clearly going to lose last night to Joe Biden, but with Warren in the race, Biden won by that extra bit more and narrowed Bernie Sanders' overall delegate lead and kept Bernie Sanders 2 or 3 delegates further away from an outright majority when convention rolls around. So Warren, from her perspective and her campaign's perspective, achieved their objective last night. Hurt the most progressive candidate in the race so that she has a chance to steal it all in Milwaukee later on in the summer. And if you read this release from the Warren campaign, they write it out clear as day that Warren's goal is to steal the convention, even though it's unlikely she will ever have a plurality, and even though it's unlikely she won't even be second or even third when it comes to the final delegate count. I'm going to read you the first and last paragraphs of this statement, because those are really the key ones. But as the dust settles after March 3rd, the reality of this race will be clear. No candidate will likely have a path to the majority of delegates needed to win an outright claim to the Democratic nomination. So you can see what they're trying to do. They're trying to say that right now, and the projections do show this right now, no one is on track for a majority of delegates. And that means that the convention is going to be what decides the nominee, not the tens of millions of voters that might give someone like Bernie Sanders a very strong plurality, but the convention. And Warren is already planting the seed that a delegate majority is unlikely, or a delegate majority, if it happens, will allow that person to win an outright majority. And she follows with the last paragraph, where she says, "Our grassroots campaign is built to compete in every state and territory and ultimately prevail at the national convention in Milwaukee." So when you combine those two things together, what Warren's team is clearly saying, no one is on track to win a majority, especially Elizabeth Warren, who's languishing far below the leaders like Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden. And because of that, we're going to compete for every delegate we can and take them to the convention and ultimately prevail at the convention, which is to say, get the nomination even though we won't have a majority and even though there'll likely be at least 2, maybe 3 candidates or more with more plurality support than we have. This is Warren running in this race to hurt Bernie Sanders, to steal the nomination from him, maybe even if she can't do that herself, give it to somebody else out of spite for all I know, but it certainly isn't progressives standing together. I guarantee you, Bernie Sanders would have never done this to Elizabeth Warren. Bernie Sanders would have 100% endorsed Elizabeth Warren and backed her, encouraged his supporters to move to her if their situations were flipped. There was a time last summer and fall where Warren was in second and Bernie was in third. And I bet you that if that situation would have held as we approach Super Tuesday, I would be very confident that Bernie Sanders would have endorsed Elizabeth Warren and would have moved support over to her. That's my fundamental belief. And we don't have to speculate because we know that as early as 2013, Bernie Sanders was trying to draft Elizabeth Warren to run for president and really only ran in the first place because she wouldn't take on Hillary Clinton. Because Warren didn't have the guts to take on Clinton, Bernie had to. But if she did in 2015, 2016, Bernie would have been there by her side every step of the way. Now, maybe that would have been a mistake because we see how weak Warren is when it comes to consistently upholding progressive values. We've seen that in this campaign. But Bernie would have done it because he, for whatever reason, really likes Elizabeth Warren, admires her, and sees her as an ally for progressive causes in the Senate and in American politics more broadly. Warren is clearly showing that she does not have the same respect and admiration for Bernie Sanders that he has for her. And that's why she's behaving in this manner. She knows deep down that this is her only way to get the nomination, is to basically steal it. But she has to know that if they're going to steal it from Bernie, they're not going to want to give it to Warren either. We could talk about how Warren has betrayed progressives. We could talk about how she's not nearly as progressive as she presents herself. But the fact is, many of Warren's policies are still too left-wing for the corporate Democratic establishment. And you can bet your bottom dollar that if they go to a contested convention and they can try to steal it from Bernie, they're not going to give it to Warren. They're going to give it to an out-and-out neoliberal like Biden or Klobuchar or Buttigieg or anybody else. But they probably won't give it to Liz Warren, especially if she's in like 4th place or 5th place when it comes to the national delegate count. It'll be bad enough if you steal it from Bernie, but it'll look even worse if you give it to a person that Bernie has 6 times more the delegates. And I have to close on this one point. Warren in this final paragraph says our grassroots campaign is built to compete in every state and territory and ultimately prevail at the national convention in Milwaukee. But I'll tell you one thing, hoping to win a few delegates here and there, almost entirely from white Americans, and then going to the convention in 3rd or 4th place to try to steal it from Bernie Sanders, who will have tens of millions of votes from white Americans, from black Americans, from Latino Americans, from every background and from every nook and cranny of the country. That's not grassroots. That is the most elite-driven, backroom, technocratic politics you could imagine. But that's what Warren is. Warren's never been about the grassroots. We're seeing it in this campaign. So for all those folks who like Elizabeth Warren, and again, there were lots of reasons to like her, you have to look at her in this moment and say, what are you doing, Liz, but trying to either steal the convention from Bernie or prevent Bernie from winning it and handing it to Biden or Bloomberg or Buttigieg or any one of the other neoliberal goons that doesn't give a damn about making life better for the people that Elizabeth Warren, at least until now, has pretended to care about.